Hello, and welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and CEO and founder of E equals Y. Each week, we explore the fascinating world of leadership featuring voices from various generations, industries, and backgrounds. It's the team's job to deliver results. It's the job of the leader to empower, inspire, and enable their team to deliver those results. And there's a repeatable formula for that. Express plus engage plus execute, powered by emotions. But how each leader shows up is unique. There's no mold to leadership, and that's what's really key is to find your own voice. So I'm really excited for our guest today because we were just talking about that before we went live, of really knowing yourself and your voice. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, let us know where you're dialing in from, and ask questions. This is very interactive, so we'd love to hear from you, and we will absolutely work in all of your questions as well. So, Steve, thanks so much for joining us today. Our guest has led under pressure in both the military and corporate arenas. Steve Fulkerson is the former Vice President of Customer Success Research at TSIA and a current commanding officer at the U.S. Navy Reserve. And he's a returning Voices of Leadership guest. I'm so excited to have you back. Steve, you've built customer success organizations, driven culture and performance. You've done a number of turnarounds, and you really have advised a number of companies on how to lead through all of the four essentials, leading with clarity, engagement, execution, and trust. And today, we're going to really talk about how some of those military-rooted leadership principles really translate into business world and what any leader can do to make sure their team can really move confidently and consistently, even when you're not in the room. And I think that's key. So Stephen, thank you. Welcome back. So excited to have you. Why don't we start with your story and kind of weave in, how did your time in the military really shape your leadership philosophy?
Yeah. Well, first, Kathy, thank you for having me back again. It's a pleasure to get to be here and be with your audience. It's been interesting because, you're exactly right. I've had two careers going on for quite some time. One, a career in customer success and technology and service type companies, and then a second as a cryptologic warfare officer in the Navy Reserve. So there's different patterns of activities that are taking place, but both of these have shaped my leadership style to various degrees. The military plays a big role in shaping some of the leadership belief systems that I've had in the corporate world of customer success, and a lot of that is around because I'm in the intelligence community, I'm actively looking at intelligence. I'm looking at what data says. I'm looking at what people say, but I'm also paying attention to what's not being said. And in customer success, that's really going to be key. When we look at data, when we look at our customers in the eye, and when we look at what they're not saying, and when we look at what is not being scripted in our data, and we're going, okay, this is telling us something. So all of that drives a type of behavior. And in terms of leadership, it really takes, an empathetic leader to look at this in a way that tells a story. And some of the greatest successes is looking at, people, process, tools in a way that helps tell a story so that we can lead better, whether we're leading our people or whether we're leading the customers. So that's just kind of a real high level view.
I love it. And when you talk about leading, and I think we talked about this last time as well, it really is about leading the people and the customers when you think about it and what you're doing. So you put a lot in there, but talk to me about, how do you think about setting up your leadership philosophy, right? Is that something that has been really important to you? Because we talk about it from a leadership playbook at E equals Y, but I think in the military they have a different term for it.
Yeah, we in the military, when you assume command, and I'm a commanding officer of a reserve unit, it's called command philosophy. What is your command philosophy? and you document this command philosophy and you share it with your unit, because you do not want there to be any surprises. You want everybody to understand how you think as a leader, what your expectations are. So in my command philosophy, because we're trying to have individuals ready to be mobilized in the event, that there's a necessity by our country, I put out a command philosophy, and it's different than some commanding officers. Some will say, hey, the mission comes first. The mission is the most important thing. We've got to get focused on the mission. And the mission is important, but I've taken a step back and I've said, hey, the number one thing I want you to focus on is you. Because if you're not in a good place mentally, physically, or spiritually, you add little to no value to the rest of us. The second thing I want you to focus on, so my number 2 command philosophy, is your family. Make sure your family is in order. Because if your family doesn't support you, then it's going to be very difficult for you to be mobilization ready or to serve in this nation's, reserve unit. And then number 3, the mission. Okay, if you're good, your family's good, now we can be focused on the mission. And how are we going to do well at executing the mission? And then number 4, readiness. How do we make sure that we are ready? So each commanding officer presents their command philosophies in terms of what their expectations are. So what I wanted my team to know very upfront is I really expect you to be focused on making sure you're good to go. And if you're not, come talk to us. If you're not in a good place physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever the case may be, come talk to us so we can see how we can help. And then make sure your family is in order. Let's take that and transition it over to the civilian side, right? The same thing is really paramount, that we come into our leadership positions and we let our people know what is it that we expect of them, right? Those command philosophies are a little bit different because it's focused on mobilization readiness. But as a customer success executive, is my team going to think he's here to get promoted because he wants another? Because you see that in executives, they have agendas. So what is your agenda as an executive? Well, if I come in and say, my number 1 focus is you as a team, I want to make sure that you're trained and ready to go, that you have the tools that you need. But also our focus is going to be the customer. They are paramount. Number 2, let's focus on the customer and let's listen to what they are saying. And then you just build your stylistic approach in terms of explaining to your team, what is it that your command philosophies are in, military terms, but in civilian side, what is my executive, philosophy? What are the things that drive me? What are the things that make me feel like this is important? And I want you to adopt this because you're a representation of me and how we're going to engage our customers. So those are the types of things that prevent chaos, right? If your team understands how you think and you're putting down on paper, this is how I think, this is what my belief system is, then there's greater opportunities for success. The worst thing that can happen is if you don't communicate to your team, right? You're in an ivory tower and they're just guessing. Well, I think that they would like it if we did this. And now we're in a guessing game, and that doesn't set anybody up for success.
And I'm guessing, and from my experience as well, this is not a one-time discussion,
Mm-mm.
right? Because I heard you say you document it, you share it with your team when you first meet, but how often do you find yourself going back to that philosophy or that leadership playbook?
Yeah, especially when it comes up in, conversations. So if your team is looking at, let's just say that you have an account that's in escalation mode. And they're talking about, hey, this is a really hard situation. How do we get this turned around? Well, if we've identified that, we want to really focus on making sure that the customer has an awesome experience. And have they had that with you? Have you done everything that you can do? And is it now incumbent upon me as an escalation point to engage? Now it's just really having a conversation with an individual and going, hey, you've done everything that that you're required to do. You're following my command philosophy or my executive philosophy. And now it's my turn to step in, and I'm going to model and show you the rest of the way in terms of what I would want this customer to experience from an executive escalation standpoint. That's just one of many examples that we can do. But to your point, Kathy, it's almost like a living document, but it's a living example. It's a living conversation that should be modeled every time that we engage with our team members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And We have a question from Ralph, and he's saying, are there any tips on how to pry those unspoken objections? Because I think where he's really going is not everyone's going to get on board right away. Um, and so when you think about it, what if they don't agree with what your priorities are, right? And they're actually, they're saying, yeah, yeah, whatever, and then doing their own thing. Have you ever experienced that scenario?
I haven't had anyone say that, you're what you're espousing, I don't necessarily subscribe to. But I think to Ralph's point is you got to create an environment where people feel safe. You're approachable. You do not put off an arrogance or a pride or a I know all. Let me give you an example of how this came to me in terms of an example. So I'm a big fan of a former admiral, um, and his name is Admiral Scott Swift. He was the former Pac Fleet commander. Call sign was not so Swift. Funny. But he had a really good leadership moment with me and some of my team. And he said, one of the things that you need to do as a leader is when you walk into the room, especially as a commanding officer, when you walk in the room, they're going to snap to and they're going to expect you to sit at the head of the table because that's where the leader sits, at the head of the table. And he said, don't sit at the head of the table. Walk around it and go sit in the middle and see what happens. And so I did my first command. I walked in, everybody snapped to, attention on deck. I walked over and I sat at the middle of the table and everybody was confused. And they said, what are you doing, sir? The CEO sits at the head of the table. And I said, whoever sits at the head of the table has all the answers. They're the answer guy. I don't have all the answers. We as a team are going to work together using our skills and experience and knowledge to make sure that we're successful. Well, that kind of level set, to Ralph's point, is it makes everybody feel like, oh, this executive is part of the team. They're here to help us and be a part of the team. It's more approachable. So if I had experienced any, discontent with my command philosophy, that probably dissolved it right there because I instantly shared that whoever sits at the head of the table is just the answer guy. Now, if I'm the smartest person in the room, it's time for me to leave the room and go find another room to get in because I don't need to be the smartest person in the room. I need to be around people smarter than me to help figure out how we're going to get some of these things done. That type of humility will really help people feel like they can talk to you about these unspoken objections. But if we lead with a sense of pride or arrogance, that's never going to come up.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, before we got on this about the ivory tower. I mean, that this is kind of that mindset, right? There's a lot of leaders that think, "Oh, I get to sit at the head of the table. I get to, don't bother me. You go do your own thing." But sitting in the middle of the table, being amongst your team and engaging is one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader.
Right. It's servant leadership, right? There's different strategies of servant leadership. Servant leadership is like, I'm here to serve you. And I always tell that from my team in the military. I always end every email with, it's a pleasure to serve you and serve with you. And that's trying to be very humble to let everybody know that, hey, I'm here to be a part of the team. I'm here to serve you and serve with you. And that's a different strategy. Now, by its within itself, historically, the military has been a command and control leadership style, right? I
Hmm.
command and I control your behaviors through my voice, through my commands, through the power of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, those types of things. That's worked up to some degree, but other leadership styles, such as David Marquette's style of intent management. That ivory tower is instead of being an ivory tower just yelling out commands, how about I get beside you, I work with you, and I communicate with you what my intentions are? Because the more I, as an executive, give conversation to you, the more you hear how I think, then you can get out in front of me because you're like, oh, I know Steve, the way he thinks is this way. So if we do this, we'll be done ahead of time. And that's what I want to do as a leader. I want to empower my team, give them autonomy so that they can get out in front and be more proactive. Because if they are, we have more efficiency, we have more creativity. I don't want people waiting to get my approval on things. Sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right?
Right, but you have to set the stage for them so they know what good looks like, right? And they can act on your behalf and make those decisions up front earlier.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
reminding me of a story where one of the companies we went into, there was a scenario where the CEO was in the ivory tower before, and I came in with the new CEO. And the first thing that we did was planted our seats right in, the main area in an open concept. And I think that's part of the challenges in today's world where we're so hybrid. You're missing some of the conversations when you get to hear your leader or your executive talking about something by osmosis, you learn, oh, I can say that or I can't say that. Oh, that's interesting how they said it. There's so much that is learned in an environment like that that you miss remotely. And then you really have to be deliberate about sharing that philosophy and what your beliefs are. Have you seen that as well?
Well, for the executives that have remote employee responsibilities, and they are adverse to using technologies such as X or LinkedIn or things of that nature that give them a virtual platform. Yes, I've definitely seen that because then it becomes very difficult for people to know their leader, especially if they're remote. And if they're not doing internal teams meetings, company meetings, things of that nature, then it's hard to get to know them. But if executives invest in using virtual platforms to reach out and connect with their teams, whether it's through the company platform or through another social platform, then that really is a window of opportunity for us to learn more about our executives, how they think, what's important to them. And they should be talking about, and we as leaders, I'm included, which we should be talking about leadership and leadership styles, leadership strategies, because we should be preparing the next generation. We should constantly be taking advantage of leadership to say, "Hey, this is a way that we should be thinking about things." So those are missed opportunities when they're not taking place.
Yeah, and that's where I always encourage leaders to really think about, you have to be in deliberate. You have to be deliberate now of knowing who you are, how you show up, how you want others. But it also brings us back to something you mentioned earlier of listening and really getting to know other people. Um, we're not all the same. And so, as a leader, you get a team and you have a lot of different personalities on the team. We do behavioral assessments a lot at Equals Y, which is Clarity 4D. But I think you have a lot of familiarity with the Herman Brain Dominance
Instrument.
Instrument. I almost got it right.
Mhm.
Um, and it's all about having the colors and the energies. Talk to us a little bit of how you use that tool as you meet a new team. If you're bringing new people onto a team, how do you leverage that as a leader?
Yeah, I use it in both ways when I'm managing up and managing down.
Mm,
So, I've had executives that are very different. They don't have a lot of EQ, and I learned about this Herman Brain Dominance Instrument through my wife, who's an actor, and she has to use this to be an actor. But I was complaining one day about an executive that I felt like had low EQ and had challenges understanding others. And she said, "Well, tell me about this person." I did, and she goes, "Well, he's blue." And I was like, "What does that mean?" And she's like, "Blue is someone that's logical, analytical, fact based, quantitative thinking." And she said, "You were talking to him in red." And I said,
mm,
"What's red?" And she goes, "Red is interpersonal, emotional based, feelings based." And she goes, "That's they don't like that. Blue people that are wired that way don't like to hear red. They want somebody to talk to them in their same color, which is blue. So you have to talk to them in the same color." So that's when I said, "Tell me more about this." So, I learned about the, blue, red, yellow, green, the different types of personalities that we all have because we're all uniquely different. And it gave me greater insights that, okay, I need to think about this for my team because they're not wired the same way. They're different. Their personality styles are different than mine. So when I listen to people, again, this is my military side, which is the intelligence side. And when I'm listening to people talk, I'm trying to figure out, are they blue, where they're very analytical, fact based? Are they green, which is very organized, sequential, planned, and detailed? Are they red, which is interpersonal, emotional? Are they yellow, which is more, holistic, integrating, synthesizing? What is the words that they're using that's telling me who they are? So that way, when I talk back to them, I'm talking to them in a language that makes sense, that lands with them. Because if I don't, then that's where we start having conflict, or we're not meeting common ground. And that can be a great recipe for success. Whether we're managing up the executives above us or we're managing our teams, is to talk to them in the language that lands with them. And it really means being a good listener and trying to figure out where that lands in terms of a color.
Yeah. Do you use that approach also with your customers when you're working with them?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah, especially when depending on which type organization you're dealing with, you try to figure out very quickly is if the customer's an executive. I tend to always go, okay, executives are typically going to land in blue or green, right? They're going to be factual based. They're going to be organized. They may be both. So I looked very quickly and try to understand what language they're using so that I can talk back to them in a way that it's going to resonate with them. But it's very important to use this with customers as well as your management team above you and the individual contributors below you.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, we had a comment or earlier from Valley where he's talking about it's not just about what's said, it's about what's not said, and respecting that different personalities and your traits show up. Like some people that have a lot of blue energy will sit back and not say anything until they're addressed, right? And you need to know, well, wait, I'm going to have to pull this person in because I might think, oh, they're disengaged or they're aloof, but no, that's just their natural tendency. And how do I draw them into the conversation? Or they can get put out. Like I tend to be, this won't surprise you, Steve, but I'm very outgoing, right? I
Very.
like people. I get my energy from that way, but I can turn people off if I'm not careful. So I think it's also knowing yourself of how do you really interact and lead people the way they need to be leaded.
Right. Each one is going to require something a little bit different. You're not going to, I mean, let's face it. I mean, we're never going to please everybody that we work with or that work for us. We try really hard, but it is important to kind of try to meet people where they're at. And that's where the ivory tower is a dangerous place to be, just sitting in your office and not really getting to know your teams and know what motivates them. That's where we really got to spend time engaging with our teams, our direct reports, being out there, hearing firsthand how things are going. But to your earlier comments, Kathy, it's hard, in a virtual environment, but there are still, ways to connect with everybody via virtual meetings and ask very, personal questions sometimes that, lend an opportunity for us to know who we're talking with and how that we can talk back to them in a way that, is meaningful.
Yeah. And as you're talking about this, it reminds me of how I often coach people where, people like, oh, I'll treat them the way I want to be treated, right? And that's the golden rule that we've been taught as kids. But I love elevating it to the platinum rule. Treat people the way they want to be treated, the way they want to speak, because you get a lot more engagement and excitement when, you're speaking their language.
Oh, absolutely. They always say that the greatest word or expression or name that you can ever say is the person's name. That we love our names more than anything. But secondary to that is, we speak the same language. We talk in a way that lands with how our personality interprets information.
Yep. Absolutely. So, what are some other things? It's interesting when we think about the military and that command control, which was traditionally, but overall, it really has been changing now because of the rate of change within the military, right? And the rate of change that happens there is the same that's happening in the civilian world and in corporate in this day and age, right? So, how do you see empowering your people with the mission, and how do you go about helping them understand then what that mission is? So I heard first, make sure you're okay. Second, make sure you know that customers, that's our primary focus, and your family. So it's either your customers, your family, right? It's taking care of your community. When you talk about the mission, do you really focus on what does the end goal look like, or do you focus on what are the things they need to have to do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Some of the best advice that I was ever given when I assumed leadership was don't tell people how to do their job. Just tell them what the end goal needs to be and let them figure out how to get there. I have been fortunate enough to have done a lot of these things where I could just go up to somebody and go, I want you to do this, and this is how you're going to do it. But it may not be their way to do it. So I've always tried to refrain from that because that's how I was trained in military leadership, which is don't tell them how to do the job. Just tell them what the goal or the outcome needs to be and let them figure it out because there's more than one way to get there. And I typically find that if I can just set the outline up for success, this is the mission, this is where we need to land, and then let them figure it out. Sometimes I'm always surprised that we get there much faster because they have a better way of thinking or their process was better than mine. And you can learn a lot from just getting out of people's way. And one of the best advice I was ever given by another military leader was, give people guidance and then get out of their way because they want to be successful.
Love it. Absolutely. And with the E3 leadership code, that's always what we're expressing on vision. Help people see what's the North Star, where are we going, why are we going? Because then you can get everyone on board and get them excited. That's how you inspire. But the stuff that they think about, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I would have told you to do these 3 steps.
Right.
And they come up with one that surpasses what you thought could even happen. You're like, oh, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, it's humbling sometimes, but we learn, right?
Yeah. Well, and you said, and which I love, is as a leader, you're not saying you have all the answers.
Right.
Your job is to get the answers from and help everyone be at their best so that as a team, you all succeed and deliver on those results.
As a leader, we have to be bulldozers. We have to get obstacles out of our people's way so that they can do their job successfully. If we are only focused on our obstacles for ourselves and our career, it's going to fail, right? Some of the best advice I was ever given, which is if you take care of the needs of others, your needs will be met. And when I focus on the needs of my team and taking care of their needs, my needs get met. So I try to get obstacles out of their way, whether it's training issues, whether it's technology shortcomings or technology problems, whether it's processes, get all those things fixed so that the team can be successful. And and it's a teamwork. That's why my command philosophy, the number one is you got to take care of you because I can take care of the people, process, and tool problems, but I can't take care of you. If you're not taking care of yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually, that's just not an area I can do much help with. So it takes 2 to tango. And in this case, the team has to be taking care of themselves. Then from there, I can get other obstacles out of their way. But I can't fix your marital problems. I can't fix your broken down car. I can't fix your rent issues. That's where you have to take care of yourself.
So you had the benefit of learning all of this and building your philosophy from the military. How do you coach other leaders today that are coming up the ranks to really embrace their own values, their own point of view, their own command philosophy?
I point them to looking at people that have inspired them from a leadership perspective, but also to really focus on those that didn't inspire them, those that disappointed them. You can learn a lot from a poor leader. And I've had plenty of poor leaders in my career where I wanted to go strangle somebody, but I learned from them. And that's key is to look at what we are seeing in poor leaders so that we don't replicate that. So when I'm preparing the next generation or other leaders, I point out to, all right, who are the people that have inspired you? What are the things and attributes that you like? And then what are the things that you didn't like in other leaders? And that really helps formulate a path of how I'm going to create my boundaries in terms of the leader that I want to become, the leader that I want to be. But getting people to take the time to think about what are the attributes that we like and the attributes we don't like. Most people don't take the time to do that. And that's really key to formulating who we are. It's the same with ethics, right? We have to know what the boundaries are because sometimes things are, there's ethical boundaries. And if we don't stop to think about it or document it or give it some thought, when it gets violated, we'll have a reaction and we don't know why.
Hmm. I agree. And we use the E3 leadership code that it's a document that kind of helps you go through what are your values, your non-negotiables, who are the best leaders you've worked with, the worst leaders, right? To your point is looking at all of that, like what environments you work best in, which ones do you work, the least best, not good words, but you know where I'm going with us and knowing your ethics, right? You need to know what's really important to you. One thing that I want to ask, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, Steven, because you know how to deliver results, but you're also highly emotionally intelligent. Sometimes I feel people think it's either way. Either you're going to be results driven or emotionally intelligent and just care. Do you see that it's actually the emotional intelligence helps you drive the results that you're able to accomplish?
For me, it is because I am super competitive, Kathy. I mean, like I compete on anything, like how fast I can eat the chips. If you're eating chips, I mean it's ridiculous sometimes. So for me, there's a competitive nature. I don't like being second place or last place. So when I look at situations to get to the outcome, it's driven a lot of times by competition. The data doesn't drive necessarily that spirit within me that wants to be competitive. There's probably an argument somebody would say, well, being number one is what's driving you, so that's data, and true. But for me, it's more of the emotional side that says I want to be the best, and I want my team to be the best. Here's an example. We just had the Admiral report just went out, and normally we get one bullet point on the Admiral's report, every now and then, a couple of times a year. But this last report that went up to the Admiral, we had three. It's the first time in my career we've ever had three bullets that went to the Admiral shouting out what my team had done. Um, but my team has figured out, because I've told them I'm very competitive. I want us to be the best unit. I want us to be the first, not the last. I want us to be the first, and I explain all the reasons why. And it's interesting to see they pick up that competitive spirit, which then drives the performance to be, which is data driven now, to be the best. So I think for me, it's more of the emotional side that drives getting to those numbers.
That's fantastic, but it's still that drive, right? I sometimes people come to me, they're like, "I can't be both," and I'm like, "Yeah, you can." That you need the balance is leadership, right? You need to have the drive, you need to have the care. In fact, my tagline is nurturing driver, right? Like I want to get stuff done, but I'm going to do it because I care, right? And that's my philosophy when I meet my team. They know that right off the bat. So
Outstanding.
so you and I could talk all afternoon. We know that. But we are at the bottom of the hour. Any last pieces of advice, anything you want to share with our audience as they, really explore how to be a better leader in this ever-changing world?
Yeah, I would say there's probably two things that kind of drive me. We talked about one of them on the last call where I was talking about, behind every complaint's a request. We talked about that,
Mhm.
but I would say from a leadership perspective, what you tolerate becomes the standard.
Mm.
So as a leader, you have to establish what is the standard going to be, and you can't tippy toe around it, right? So when you see uh, something that is not going well, you have to address it. Whether that's a failure on the people, process, or tools, or yourself, you have to remember that what you tolerate becomes a standard. And if you've tolerated it and people are breaking whatever your value system is or your leadership style, it's on you because you've tolerated it. And then I would say the second bit of advice that have been given that I really believe in is to take the hard jobs. Whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're middle management or executive management, take the hard jobs, because nobody grows and learns by doing things that are easy. The only way that we're going to grow and learn is to do really exceptionally hard stuff. And that exceptionally hard stuff is what forms and shapes us into becoming better leaders and better people writ large.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for that. And if anyone missed our last chat, where Stephen really did talk about behind every complaint is a request and listening to your customers, go back and listen to that one. I'll have Imelda put the link into that event as well. But we also dug into how to use your ethics in the workplace and really drive your behaviors. And that was another fantastic conversation. So we'll make sure people have that link and listen to that. But Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. You have so many nuggets of wisdom to share, and I always enjoy chatting with you. I learn something new every time, but you really do epitomize what we consider an E3 leader, someone that expresses the end vision, engages their people the way they want to be engaged, you execute and deliver results, and you power that with emotional qualities. So thank you. for all you
Thank
do.
you, Kathy. It's always a pleasure to get to spend time with you, and thank you for having me back on your awesome show.
Thank you. I hope you'll come back because, again, I know there's still more out there. And if anyone wants to learn more about the E3 Leadership Code, this E3 Leadership Profile, talking about and creating your leadership playbook, we have our boot camp is starting October 8th. Please feel free to come join us. Imelda just put the link in the chat. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. We've had people from all over the world. So it's been a great event. Thank you. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.